Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Wall Street Journal published a piece about Biden's age, and boy, oh boy, there were some upset liberals, Morning Joe, freaking out. Whole meltdown. It's interesting. The whole thing is interesting. We've also got a look at Trump's short list for VP, kind of an interesting list there too, so we'll dig into that. A new survey has revealed that the #1 policy priority for Gen Z is housing affordability, something we have been covering here quite a bit, but does not get nearly enough attention here in Washington. We also have an interesting story for you. So a remote tribe was given Starlink and gained internet access, and it's not going so well. A lot of revealing things about what, internet does to us in modern society, and new research about our children's brains and all kinds of stuff to get into there. We also have some very serious news coming out of Israel and the Gaza Strip in particular. New York Times revealing that the Israeli government was behind an influence op targeting American lawmakers. This comes as we are just waking up to additional carnage in the Gaza Strip, another Israeli airstrike targeting a school, dozens of Palestinians dead. A lot going on there to get into. Meanwhile, Columbia Law Review, they published a single pro-Palestinian article, and the board was so upset that they killed the entire website. Not a joke. Took down the entire website because of this one article. So we have a fantastic guest in to talk to all of that.
Yes, that's right. Before we get to any of that, we have an amazing counterpoints debate that is going to come for everybody, for the public tomorrow, for premium subscribers tonight. It is about the Trump trial. We've got a MAGA lawyer versus somebody who's defending the case. So if you want to actually look into both the legal details, because they do argue on that front, but also politically, you want to go ahead and subscribe. It's going to be great television, breakingpoints.com. Also, just for everybody in general, for any other questions, support at locals.com if you're having issues with your account. Now, as Krystal said, the Wall Street Journal really poked the hornet's nest here by reporting the most obvious story in the world. Let's put it up there on the screen. Behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping. Wow, really? Just behind closed doors? That's the only place? Participants in meetings said that the 81-year-old president performed poorly at times. The White House said Biden is sharp and his critics are playing partisan politics. Now, I encourage everybody to read this. It's a couple thousand words. What they do is they have compiled this piece for 3 separate meetings focusing on Ukraine aid, on debt ceiling aid, and previous economic negotiations and others that compile in concrete terms how and when the exact circumstances of Biden kind of losing it manifest themselves in private meetings. Because that's always been the spin. Yeah, in public, he may lose his step every once in a while, but he's sharp, he's there.
He's a dynamo. Behind closed doors, let me tell you, he's a dynamo.
And there, Krystal, I mean, really what comes through here is just the Pravda-esque nature of how they want to deny reality. For example, 41 people, as I said, were interviewed for this piece, including many Democratic lawmakers who shared details and recordings. And in fact, one of those congressmen, Representative Gregory Meeks, was explicitly told after the White House was told that he had been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal to call back the reporter and just say, I should just give you a call back, according to Representative Gregory Meeks. The White House wanted me to set the record straight.
Yeah.
They also had people like Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, give quotes like this, quote, Biden is incredibly strong, forceful, and decisive. I mean, this is like North Korea level propaganda.
And I think we have that moment in the interview where they disclose. They say, after the offices of several Democrats shared with the White House a recording or details about what was asked in our interviews, some of those lawmakers spoke to the Journal a second time and once again emphasized Biden's strength. So the White House was like, wait, what are they asking you about? You need to call them back and tell them just how amazing he is and, be more strident in your defense of him. So very clear what's going on here. I mean, okay, so none of this will be a surprise to anyone with eyeballs and ears who've been watching Joe Biden. Some of the details, just to give you a sense of what they're reporting behind closed doors. They lead the piece by saying when President Biden met with congressional leaders in the West Wing in January to negotiate a Ukraine funding deal, he spoke so softly at times that some participants struggled to hear him. That's something you see repeated a couple times in this piece in various meetings, according to 5 people familiar with the meeting. He read from notes to make obvious points, paused for for extended periods and sometimes closed his eyes for so long that some in the room wondered whether he had tuned out. There were other anecdotes. Mike Johnson was involved in one where he seemed to not grasp the details of his own policy. What is described overall is what they call a quote unquote unevenness. So it's not that he's 100% addled 100% of the time. Sometimes he appears sharp and sometimes he appears, as he reportedly did in this meeting, where he's kind of out of it and he's really reliant on note cards and defers to everyone in the room. You aren't even sure whether he's awake or asleep. His speech is, very difficult to understand, both because it's soft and also because he fails to enunciate. You get the same defenses from the White House as always, that this is nonsense. They actually look at what a great job he's doing as president of the United States. They also go back to his speech impediment, the stutter. The one thing I'll say, so what opened this piece up for criticism from liberals is the fact that they couldn't get any Democrats on the record to say this.
Yes.
So all of the on-the-record comments are from like Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson and other Republicans. And so that's what opened this piece up to the criticism that it was like a partisan hit job. But the other thing that's funny to me, Saagar, is that we go through these periods of time that it's like there's certain moments when you're allowed to say these things out loud. Remember, there was a moment a little while ago after the report came out and, Biden was this like addled old man and they're saying, I don't even know if you can prosecute this guy because the jury's just going to think he doesn't really know what's going on and none of this was intentional. There was a moment there where there was some elite ability, Ezra Klein, et cetera, to say these things out loud. And now that window has once again closed and the ranks have been closed once again. It's very clear Biden is not going anywhere. He's not being replaced. So we're once again in a place where you are not allowed to say these things that are patently obvious to probably 90% of America.
That is extraordinarily well said. It's like this constant oscillation between he's too old, we got to replace him. Actually, no, he's completely fine. As opposed to the best defense you could really muster is his name is not Donald Trump and he's fine. He's fine-ish. That's basically it. But Biden is such a incredible egomaniac that any suggestion that he's lost any step whatsoever is met with the full fury of the White House. In that Time magazine interview that we spoke about on Tuesday, they asked him, can an 85-year-old really do the job of president? And he was just like, I could do it better than you. He's like, I could take you, like looking across at these two like mid-40s journalists. That's just obviously not true. I mean, again, he's asking us to deceive, to not believe our eyes. Like that's basically what is being asked. It's, again, 1984 Pravda level. And then speaking of Pravda and of state media and propaganda, you have regime apparatchiks, basically Morning Joe here, Mika and Joe Scarborough, absolutely losing their minds over this Wall Street Journal story. Let's take a listen.
People around Mike Johnson and admit that this was basically House Republicans whacking.
Why didn't they just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene to weigh in?
Exactly. Why did? They could have
and
just.
Lauren Boebert.
Yeah, see both those guys right there? I've spent time with both of those guys privately. I've spent time with Biden and Trump privately. I've spent time with every House Speaker over the past 30 years and Joe Biden. It's just not close. If you want to talk about international affairs, if you want to talk about how to get bipartisan legislation, Joe Biden is light years ahead of all of them. And I could also talk about what the French delegation said when they were negotiating with him and what they told me and friends that I have in that French delegation who were part of those negotiations who said that Macron came out like, wow, okay, it's a lot tougher than we expected. And actually, I think Macron sort of got his back up because Biden was pressing so hard. Can tell you the same thing about Middle Eastern leaders that I talked to. Nobody's saying he's not coaching. And some people are suggesting that he, a bit too tough in negotiations, that the United States throws their weight around a little bit too much.
Oh, wow. The French said that he's good, Krystal. Apparently he's the sharpest tack in the history of France.
Again, dynamo behind closed doors. Okay, well, maybe let us see it sometime.
I want to address the Republican thing, too, because it's like you said, yeah, you know why they have to rely on Republican on-the-record quotes? Because the Democrats won't go on the record and say what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And again, to actually be very fair to the Journal, they even quoted Republicans who defended him, really elderly senators, who said, no, yeah, actually what you see is what you get. He's okay. You know, he's sharp, not sharp as a tack, but they defended him saying, I've never been in a meeting with him where I didn't think that he didn't 100% have what it takes. So what they're upset about is the very concrete examples. Kevin McCarthy maybe being the best one. Is he a partisan guy? Absolutely. But he's like, listen, I used to meet with him when he was vice president 8 years ago. I went over to his house all the time. And in fact, he's always had this reliance on note cards. And by the way, I love that that's the defense, is that, oh no, he's always been a scripted buffoon being told exactly what to say by his aides. And nowadays, whenever I meet with him, I am honestly shocked at his diminishment. They also talk about in many of those meetings where, like you highlighted from the story, he doesn't take a commanding role. He'll very frequently just defer to a lot of the people around him. And again, they just say this is standard operating procedure. Even if that's a young and healthy president, that worries me. I don't necessarily want a person who doesn't have a lot of thoughts, who is not driving the meeting, who's constantly deferring to his advisors. You are the elected president of the United States. So even their own defense, it just doesn't pass the smell test on any of this.
There's a few other things. So to be honest with you, I think if people felt like the economy was great, they wouldn't really care that much about Biden's age, even if they had a sense of like, yeah, maybe sometimes in meetings he's not as sharp as he used to be, or sometimes he has these moments, or he's not as forceful, you know, when he's giving a speech, et cetera. I think if people felt like the administration had delivered for them and had been effective then and was in control both on domestic policy and on foreign policy, I think that they would be able to overlook these things. But when you have a sense both that, okay, my personal finances, things are not going well, and I don't have confidence you're the guy that's going to be able to get it together to right the ship, that's when it becomes a really difficult combination. And we should also say, too, and people were pointing this out, I won't be the only one, that, you know, Biden really, he didn't fully commit to this, but he really suggested when he was running for president in 2020 that he may be a one-term president, that he would be, you know, the bridge to the next generation. So it wasn't just us or the American people who were like, you know, that's really an advanced age to be holding this incredibly powerful, incredibly demanding job. He himself was basically suggesting that when he was running back in 2020. One other thing I want to address is, you know, part of what Biden's advocates and what Joe Scarborough here are saying is like, well, just look at the results. Look at how effective he's been. And he shouts out in particular foreign policy and how amazing and incredible. It's like, what country do you live in? What world do you live in? Do you see the way that he's just sort of careening from humiliation to humiliation when it comes to the Middle East in particular, when it comes to Israel in particular? I mean, his own aides have basically acknowledged that the bear hug Netanyahu strategy was an utter and complete failure. Every single, you know, quote unquote red line, none of them, of course, which were actually red lines, but all of the concerns that were expressed, all of the tough conversations that were being had behind the scenes, none of them amounted to jack shit. So how can you look at that and say, oh, this is so effective and he's so commanding and he's so in charge and this is going so well? So, you know, just on every level, it's gaslighting, it's asking people to not believe what they see in front of their eyes. And it's also painting an incredibly different portrait of the record itself, which, again, I think if the record was effective and people felt like he was delivering for them, his administration was delivering for them, yeah, I think they would be willing to overlook these things. But when you put the two together, that's when you end up with a very dire re-election landscape.
Absolutely. No, it's very well said. And, you know, with what we see in terms of the public and in the private, it is clearly a man who is not fully in control, or whenever he is in control, does so at the whims of his emotions, which this is one of those where it's not even necessarily him being old. What they always say about being old is it just makes you more of who you already are. Yeah. He's always been that way. He's been a stubborn guy. That's how he's been from the very beginning of his career. Let's put this up there on the screen as we can continue to see here with Joe Scarborough. He says, I have spent a good time talking to Kevin McCarthy through the years and hours with Biden in 2024. There is no comparison. Biden is far sharper, more intellectually curious, and far more insightful on global affairs than any House GOP speaker I have met in over over 30 years. It's just, again, he wants us to believe a fake version of who the man that we can all see in front of our eyes is. And funnily enough, whenever it comes to the American people, they can see right through it too. Now, I definitely agree with you. If the economy is doing better, I actually think it'd be okay, because people will be like, yeah, whatever. You know, Reagan was old, we reelected him, everything was fine. But let's put this up there on the screen. When things are not going well and you're banking on everyone just saying, but Trump, but Trump, but Trump, really what you see is that Trump versus Biden, the conviction so far is not having a big impact yet. This is from New York Magazine in their review of a few of the polls that have come out since the conviction of Donald Trump has come forward. You've seen a slight movement, maybe 2 points or so. That's been very temporary. But overall, the big promise of the convicted felon really moving everything has just not materialized. And over and over and over and over again, we see a consistent thing in all of the national polling. And specifically, a lot of the voters Democrats supposedly care about, young people, black people, and Hispanics. They're like, look, Trump, yeah, he's an asshole. In fact, many of them agree that he should have been convicted. They agree with the conviction. And they still say, but I think that he represents some sort of major change, and the economy is just not very good under Biden. So a lot of this is coming back or reverting to the fundamentals, which Biden was really the greatest beneficiary of not having any real fundamental elections. 2020 was a crazy year for a variety of reasons, mostly because of COVID. 2022, same thing. He got the great abortion bump and defied history. But, you know, the only question is like that tail end effect, is that really going to hang on here? I still think there's a chance, but not nearly as good as it used to be.
Yeah, I would say that's the case. Put up eight guys, these screenshots with the voter comment. This is so funny because it just shows you, like, you know, as much as we try to get in the head of the average voter, you can never get in the head of the average voter. They are their own. Yes. They have their own view of the world, and I genuinely love this. So this was a Frank Luntz moderated focus group post-Trump conviction. And we've got this guy, Ben. He's 42. He's from Texas. He's white. He's a college advisor. And there were a few comments he made that people were taking note of with regards to the conviction. So one of them, he says, listen, of the Stormy Daniels stuff, we're all regular people with regular jobs. If any of us all did, like 1,000th of what this guy did for being on trial, the financial stuff, the forms, the bribes, the meeting with people, we all would have been fired. True. We all would have been out on our butts, applying for jobs at grocery stores or driving Uber or whatnot. You're saying it's all like a political theater and farce and whatnot. But he was having an affair with a porn star, and not a particularly attractive one at that. There are so many wonderful porn stars out there. So the first comment is about, like, really, this porn star? There are other so much better porn stars out there for you to have an affair with. But that's not all from Ben. He also talks about how he wants a president. This is his quote. I want a president who's going to be able to cover up a $130,000 bribe to Stormy Daniels. If he can't pull that off, I'm not going to trust him with the nuclear football. This seems like such an easy thing for him to screw up. I'm kind of leaning toward Biden now. He's like, listen,
you gotta love it.
You can't even cover up your affair with a porn star properly? Like, how are you competent to run government? I don't know. I think I'm going towards the other guy. I love that logic. It's so amazing. It's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, like you said, listen,
he's got a point, to be honest with you.
In a certain way, you could see it. You can kind of see what he's talking about. We also had to pull the latest Biden moment, which is just, I guess, odd. Is odd the kindest way to put this?
Odd.
It's just, this is what people think about whenever people are like, man, Biden, he's really old. Let's take a listen.
President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the ballot, sir?
For people who are just listening, he's walking out of this presser very slowly, old man gait. I saw people online saying it looks like he's being controlled by puppets. You know, it's very
what?
And then he stops. Somebody shouts a question. He stops. He slowly turns and gives this weird grin, and then slowly turns back. And weird. It's just, I mean, listen, is it a big, of course it's not a big deal, but it was one of those things that went crazy viral because it just was odd, and it showed off all of his like old man gaits and tendencies. and whatever. And he's producer Mac he's probably trying to come up with some witty retort, but his brain just doesn't have that in it anymore. So he just turns back and keeps walking off.
Yeah, I have a couple friends on the White House press corps, and what they tell me is that with him, it all comes across in the camera too. But it's when he puts those aviators on, he really believes he's 40 years old again. In his head, he believes he's still got it all there. And any suggestion, any even inkling that something is moving away, he just cannot mentally handle that. And on a certain level, I think we can all empathize. We know there's a lot of old people who want to feel that way, but he's running for re-election. And same thing there with his gait. Look at him walk. Look at the way that he talks. Remember the Afghanistan press conference? That one's burned into my mind because that's the first time I was like, oh my God. Whenever he was whispering and leaning, there talking about some of those who died, I was like, oh my, you can't do this, man.
Mixing up the president of Egypt with the president of Mexico, telling examples. Stories about, the German chancellor who's been dead for however many years.
Died 10 years ago.
And retelling the same anecdote. Yeah. And again, these are things, if you have someone in your life who you've, loved dearly and who's aging, these will all seem very familiar to you. The inability to grasp certain words at certain times, the mixing up of people, of events, of years, the forgetting that you just told this anecdote, 5 minutes ago, and now you're telling this anecdote again. These are all just very common, typical things that we see. And, I also have to say, if Democrats really believe this rhetoric about how the whole country is at stake and democracy is on the line, et cetera, why'd you close ranks against this guy? Yes. We see in every poll, he underperforms every single Democratic Senate candidate. All of them, 100%. He underperforms them. I am at this point really convinced that you could put almost anyone else into the slot and they would outperform Joe Biden. And yeah, I know that goes against history because typically there's a huge incumbency advantage, but you have a very specific and unique set of circumstances here. And Democrats decided to close ranks, I think in large part after the midterm elections went better than expected. That kind of closed the door to Gavin Newsom or whoever was playing with the idea of jumping in the race. And now they're just locked into, denying the reality that's in front of all of our faces.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we really are going to watch is a very similar thing that happened in the lead up to the 2020 election. So in 2019, when Biden is losing his first two primaries and caucuses, and he's a joke, 5th place, everybody, including MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell, is like, this guy's way too old. What is it? Which Castro was it? Was it Joaquin? I think maybe Julian, whichever one was running for office. He even calls him out on the debate stage. This is open, it's acknowledged. Democratic elites, we're allowed to talk about it. Julian, there we go. All right, I apologize, they're twins. Okay? They literally look the same, it's not my fault. But then, what happens? The Atlantic article comes out and he becomes the nominee. And then the COVID is a national crisis. So what happens? Oh, he has a magical stutter that he had as a child and then it happened to just reemerge when he turned, around 78 years old. And even though we've all seen him in public life, including many of these reporters, know him personally, know that he could speak cogently in the past. I've done monologues in the past of his Meet the Press appearances over the years up until 2017, completely different individual. I personally saw him on the campaign trail in 2012, completely different man to what he is. But it was after that article, then the attacks come out. No, we're not allowed to talk about it. So very similar thing. Ezra Klein can say it. Nate Silver could write it. That was kosher. That was okay. Now it's official. We're less than 6 months till Election Day. We got to put the guardrails back on. But this is where we don't live in the monoculture media moment anymore. Every person on TikTok, Instagram, and everywhere can see these memes proliferate everywhere.
Yeah.
So they can't cover it up anymore.
Yeah.
So good luck. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.